The story I'm going to describe is, imagine yourself out of Crescent, doing well, doing great, feeling good about yourself, taking your medication and enjoying life, all right? And you're feeling brilliant. And imagine that you're this frog hopping in the water, all right? Enjoying the rains. It was raining early this morning, and amazing on June the 10th, right? And you're hopping along and you thinking life is great, having attended all the talks while you have been at this facility, and you see a scorpion on a small island near you shouting out, "Hey, can you help me?" And the scorpion said, and you look at the scorpion and you think, geez, what does this scorpion want? Because you had learned while you're at this facility, stay away from the scorpions, the hawks, all the other dangerous predators that want you, right? And you shout back to the scorpion, "I can't help you, you're a scorpion and I'm a frog. And if I help you, you'll sting me." You had learned now, stay away from all those bad people out there, all those triggers, all those nasty predators, right? And the scorpion shouts back out, "I need your help to get across the water. I can't swim because I'm a scorpion once. And two, it doesn't make sense for me to sting you, because if I sting you and you die, then I won't survive as well." So you say, "Okay, I'll come up with a plan." And you shout back to the scorpion, "Okay, I'll help you across the water. And just before we reach the other side, I'm going to dive down into the water and you better jump off me onto the land, and that way you survive. And brilliant, because I get to do my good deed and be grateful and gracious and show the world how much I'm giving and selfless and all those nice things, right? Because that's apparently makes us feel good." So the scorpion says, "Any deal is better than no deal. It's like a get out of jail free card, because I'm here stuck on this island and it's going to rain so heavily and I'll drown on this island." So it jumps onto your back and you're swimming across. And you chat to the scorpion and you realize, hey, she also doesn't like the mongooses or the snakes and the other predators, so you've got a bit in common. So chatting, going along, and just before you reach the other side, the scorpion stings you. And you bloat up with the poison and you shout out to the scorpion, "Why did you do this? Now I'm going to die and you're also going to die." And the scorpion, as it also disappears under the water, says, "I can't help this. I'm a scorpion and this is my nature." Now you might say, what's that got to do with us being in here? At some point you probably felt like that frog. You agree? Where life has got you down to the point you ended up in here. Well, as much as you feel like that frog, people accuse you of being the scorpion. Or sometimes you feel like the scorpion, people accuse you of being the frog, and sometimes you feel like a frog and everyone accuses you of being a frog, and all various permutations. So we're going to discuss those mental and emotional states that brought us to this place. How are you feeling before you got here? How were you feeling? What was your emotional, mental state before you got to this place? What would you say? I assume some of us were depressed. Anxious. Stress, yes. I heard overwhelmed. Burnout, yes. Decreased confidence. Rejected. Okay, rejected. Abandoned. Are you in control of the situations? No, so you agree we have no control. And are you telling others what to do, or they tell you what to do? They tell you what to do. You must take your meds, you must go to the clinic, you need to sort yourself out, you need to come to work when you're better, and don't waste our time moping all over the show, whatever it is. All right, so it's me less than others. What else are you feeling? You agree we feel abused, and you're feeling a victim, and you have no coping skills, low energy, low everything. In fact, all these things are low. What's high? Your guilt levels. All right, guilt. All right, guilt levels. Good space or bad space? And we can fill up the whole board, by the way, with words. You know, crying, tears, stagnant, stuck, weak, anything and everything, right? And we've got all the criteria for depression, anxiety, every negative mood state in that space. All right? And when you feel in that space, does it give you energy or decrease your energy? Decreases our energy. And it's like this. The one analogy I use is like, if I had to hold this pen like this, it's kind of easy. You agree? But if I had to hold this pen like this for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, it's like torture, huh? All right? You get your kid to do this, right? Okay? At some point, it goes down. All right? Why? Because this negative emotional state takes up energy. Okay? But does that mean you and I give up being depressed, low, hopeless, worthless, useless, overwhelmed? Do we just say, oh, I'm not being that way. I'm going out to have a coffee break and come back into the clinic when I feel all right? Well, how do you feel when you feel depressed? Do you feel depressed for like a couple hours, then okay for a few hours where you're like rocking and rolling, and then you feel depressed? How does depression, anxiety, hopelessness, stress work out? All the time. Yes. Can you let go of it for a few minutes, few days, come back in? It overwhelms you, overburdens you. And like that, you know that hand out, your hand somewhere out here. You agree? And it's like a pendulum that's being held on one end. And who's doing the holding? You are. We are. You agree? We're holding it all day, that hand out there. Okay? But the problem is we can't let go. It's just out there. And it's in a very passive space because all this thing gives you no energy. All right? And it's a very stressful space to be in. All right? Because if you are... And that's a mental and emotional stress state because you can't let go. Physical stress at some level, you can let go. For example, in this country, they run between Durban and Maritzburg once a year. And not because they're running away from the police or anything, they just run, right? It's seen as a sport, right? It's our major marathon. Everyone in this country knows the Comrades Marathon, right? And we run between Durban and Maritzburg, and the next year we run back from Maritzburg to Durban, right? And just imagine all of us, yes, we'd love to in our dreams, run between Durban and Maritzburg, and you're running, right? And you got the crowds behind you, and you reach the top of this hill, I assume, and you can see Maritzburg, Peter Maritzburg down there. Kind of makes you feel good, you agree? Like, wow, right? But if you are dog tired, and you did it in 6 hours, which is brilliant apparently, right? And you're really rocking and you're tired, you're exhausted, and you did it in 6 hours and you're expecting to do this in 8 hours, and wow, but you are tired, your legs can't move. What do you and I do at that point? And there's a nice service station, you know, they have their coffee, their teas, the water, the physio. What are you and I going to do? Say it. You stop. Yeah, you don't run anymore. You stop, you get a massage, you have some refreshments, and then you conquer the last bit, hopefully, right? So you can stop being physically exhausted, but mental and emotional exhaustion is something you just can't stop. Your hand is just stuck out there, and it just you can't get it down. It completely drains you, exhausts you, and you're asking your doctors for medication that gives you energy. And then beyond just giving you medication that gives you energy, then you need medication that gets you to sleep. And then you need medication that ups you. Then you need medication that stabilizes you. Then you need medication that... And this doctor just doesn't get it. You agree? Like, what kind of medication is this, right? Doesn't do it to me. Plus, it makes me fat, you know? Right? So all these various things. So we all take that. Why? Because there's an imbalance, right? But what if I said to you, you recognize, your mind recognizes this is not a good place to be. Right? It doesn't want to be in that depressed state. It's painful. It causes hurt. It causes suffering. What if I said to you, every single moment, your mind, your brain is trying to break out of that space? What do you feel? You agree? It's trying to break out. You don't believe me, but I can tell you something. What is your mind currently doing? Hopefully. What is it doing? What does it do when it's sitting out there? What it's doing when it's at dinner, what it's doing at 2 in the morning sometimes while you're awake. Thinking. And what are you thinking about? Everything. What are you thinking about in terms of everything generally? Because sometimes you come back to the problem. You agree? And what are you thinking about in terms of the problem? How to fix it. We're looking for the solution. Your mind knows how to come up with solutions. You are trained in solutions. You learn from school. 1 + 1 = 2. That was a solution. In grade 1, you got that right. You were rocking. All right? In grade 10, you probably got a more complicated version of it. But now in life, if anyone had the solution to our problems, they'd be rocking, right? There'll be a queue outside the door of someone who says, I've got the solution to your problem. But you kind of know, given you spoke to your psychologist, psychiatrist, and you spoke to your fellow people in here, that there seems to be no solution to the problem. So what does the mind do? Does it say, stop wasting my time here? What does it do? Goes round and round and round in circles looking for the solution. It never switches off. You know this. When you woke up in the morning, your mind was like, why am I here? And bang, we're going to work on this, right? It just goes round and round, and it becomes like a storm, a war in your brain. It just goes anywhere and everywhere. You're just all over the place. You agree? And your mind becomes like it's racing, it's flying all over the show, trying to find solutions to the problems. We can solve the conflicts in other parts of the world. We know the solution to our government's problems, but we're struggling with our problems. Right? We know everyone else's solutions, and I'll give you an example how we actually solve other people's problems later, much more than ours. So the whole thing is we're trying to solve the problem, but the mind doesn't get to it. It's a war going on in the mind. Right? There's complete conflict, complete mess in our brains. All right? So what's interesting, though, your mind, at some level, will even do this, and I'm going to show it where it swings across. Where this pendulum swings in an effort to break free, you know, like you want to get me out of there, right? You know, we pull at something, right? It's because it's stuck there and it's draining you. We swing our arm, all right? And what you might have done is you might have even acted impulsively, all right? I'm going to write a word here. We might have even reacted, okay? What else? We might have tried to snap out of it. Our friend says, snap out of the state you're in. You're always in this negative space. All right? But rather than being in a good space, you end up being irritable. You end up being frustrated. What else do you think goes here? You feel angry. And you want to shout at who? At who are you shouting at? You may not be shouting on the outside. You're shouting on the inside to who? Yourself. And sometimes you might shout to others close to you, and you might even be screaming. You want to fight. And you might even become abusive towards who? Yourself and others. You become harmful. You might become dangerous. All right, dangerous and obnoxious. Let's write that word. And arrogant. We wrote me less than others on the one side. Here it's me greater than. That means you don't tell me what to do. I will sort out my life. I will get things sorted. You don't rule me. I will get everything done, and I will show you who's in charge. If anything, we've lost control. Okay, because if someone's shouting and screaming out in the corridor, we say they've lost it. We don't think they're in control of it. So what's interesting is that rather than being passive, you end up in a space where it is more aggressive. So we all know what kind of words fit in on one side, and we know the words that fit in on the other side. What's the fundamental difference between the two? How's the energy levels on this side? Low. On this side? High. But both are negative spaces. Both are places we don't want to be, and some of us are flying between the two ends. One moment you hear one, because the brain is reacting, it's trying to break free, it wants to not be in one or the other, but both take away energy. In fact, the angry, shouting, screaming, how long can you throw a tantrum for? Okay, some of us have kids. How long does your kid throw a tantrum for? Sometimes it seems for days. But how long do they generally may throw a tantrum for? A few minutes. Okay, you lucky. Okay, sometimes they throw a tantrum. They want to keep it up. They keep it up for an hour, okay, maybe, right? But it's difficult to keep it all day. And interestingly enough, after they throw the tantrum, you agree, they sleep kind of well. Huh? They might be crying in their sleep, but they kind of go to bed because they're exhausted, right? And we don't appreciate it because you got exhausted by the tantrum as well, right? So but the interesting reality is that we can be depressed for days. But anger is something difficult to sustain because it means high energy in a negative space. Both are negative. By a show of hands, because some of us spend more time on one side than the other, how many of us are more on the passive side? And how many of us on the aggressive side? Wow, one. All right? Most of us are on the passive side. All right? And sometimes those we feel we're on the aggressive side, what I've recognized is sometimes I've had a group come in here where they've said most of them are on the aggressive side. And I used to wonder, wait a minute, there's not much energy here. Some of them really crawl in and they low. And why are they saying they got high energy? And sometimes you get a passive group and they look like they got high energy. Sorry, they'll claim to be on the passive side, but they say they got they look quite energized. But the thing is, what's interesting, when you identify with this side, what you're telling me is the war that's going on within your minds. You understand? The shouting, the screaming. And no one necessarily can see it on the outside, but you're identifying with the pain, the hurt, and the high energy levels on the inside. But sometimes we can recognize, as much as you've been there, we end up here in the negative on the inside and it manifests on the outside. All right? So let me ask you this. So given we feel we're on this side, right? And let's draw it where we, in this pendulum ball, and we're on the passive side. Generally, there are 3 causes of misery, so I've read. One is personal health, okay? Because I guess there's sadly people in the world who've got COVID at the moment. They just receive the diagnosis. They're on their first day, their second day. At some level, you're feeling, oh my God, I can't breathe. And that gives you a little stress, or lots of stress, all right? And then you're taking these deep breaths and you're watching all these deep breathing exercises on YouTube at the moment. And you say, I can breathe. And we're all adopting yogic stances and trying to breathe, right? Because of physical health issues, right? It's things like the sales of balloons might have gone up because all of us are blowing into balloons to build up our lungs and breathe, right? All part of the COVID, breathe, right? And as much as it seems I'm joking, there's a high level of truth, that you need to ensure you're breathing, all right? The other level of misery, or the other cause of misery, is natural disasters. In fact, COVID might be seen as a natural disaster. Earthquakes, floods. The third level is the people and persons around you. 99% is people and person generated. You agree? As much as you go to work, it's relationships at the work. You have no issue with your desk, the fact that they give you free coffee or your laptop or whatever they give us. It's the person and people. You couldn't sometimes care about the environment you work in as long as the people were good. What made school good wasn't as a kid, you're not bothered about the size of the science lab or whether your football field had green grass versus astroturf. Maybe as a minor issue. What made school life great or bad was the people around you and your teachers. That was determined it. You and I are social beings. We react and respond to the people around us. You agree? And if you think of the issues and circumstances that brought you here, over the years as a doctor, people always are talking about people. When I ask you sometimes what brought you to the clinic, I've had people talk for an hour about a significant other in their lives. Then I ask them, what about you? And says, I'm not good. Then they'll go back to talking about the person in their life. And sometimes we'll spend 3 weeks talking about that people that brought you here. And the only problem is that person's not admitted and we can't do anything about them. And the only thing we can change is how we react and respond to them. So what's interesting, what you're saying to me, and this is very important, is that in order for us to be here, there has to be a person or people here. So let me show you this. In order to say that you feel abused, right? What you're saying to me is that someone is being abusive. Right? In order to feel abused, someone has to be abusing you. Or people have to be abusing you. In order to feel someone is saying, me greater than others, I'll show you who's in charge, there's someone else who's saying me less than others, who has to be in a state where your power's been taken away from you. In order to have lost control, you are trying to push someone in a position where they have no control. In order to someone to behave harmful and dangerous, you have to be in a space where you are guilt and have no coping skills and taking away energy. Does that resonate for us? So in order to be aggressive, you need someone who's prepared to be passive. In order to be passive, you need someone who's be aggressive. As we discussed earlier, in order to be a scorpion, there needs to be a frog. In order to be a nail, there has to be a hammer. If you want to try the nail and hammer experiment, you're welcome to. Anyone's got kids? Right? Some of you got kids. I got a 7-year-old. He's at school, all right? He'll come home around 2. I can phone home and say, give him a hammer for the day. What do you think will happen to the house? He'll feel that he's become Thor in one moment, and the harsh concern is that he's got a 5-year-old sister, and her head might. You understand what I'm saying, right? Because we become, sometimes when we take on gadgets, we become one with the gadget, as we've all recognized. We're all responsible because that phone can't leave your side sometimes, right? Forget your side, you can't leave your hands, right? Become one with the instrument. In order to be on one side, you have to have someone or some people on the other side. You agree? And in your minds, you're thinking of all those people that fit in on the other side. Okay? And perchance, we do this, right? So most of us agreed we're on the victim side, the hopeless side, the worthless side, the useless side. We identify with that. Now let's do another experiment as such, where all those people you figured fit in on the other side, we invite them into this room. We all go outside, right, for a coffee break, and we invite all those people that you feel fit in on this side. And I hope we don't have to hire a stadium, all right? But we invite them into this room, all right? Okay? COVID distancing and stuff. Or some of you may be arguing, no, let them sit next to each other and cough on each other. So they sit in here, and you felt they're on this side. And I do the same talk with them. But I don't ask them which side yet do they fit in on. But your picture is put up on the board, right? And I ask them, in relationship to you, remember this is your crowd that you invited, the one that beat you up in school, your mom, your dad, whoever it is, right? We bring them into the room and I put up your picture. And I say, in relationship to you, where are they? On the victim side, the passive side, or on the aggressive side? Which side will they identify with in relationship to you? Because this is all about you. Which side do they belong on? The aggressive side. They'll think they're victims.
They're aggressive because they're victims.
They're aggressive because they're victims. You're right. It's amazing. We're all in a dilemma here. Because which side will they say they're on? They will say they're on that side, huh? Why are they on the same side, given that you're the one who kind of are in this clinic receiving help, trying to work on yourself, feeling like a victim, lost control, no control, unsure, indecisive? Why are you feeling? Why would they say they're on that side? They're out there having a ball, enjoying life. Why do you feel they'll say they're on that side? So who's correct? Do we need to get an impartial judge from the Human Rights Court to decide who's correct?
I guess everyone's correct.
Everyone's correct. Okay, we're having these commissions of inquiry at the moment. Imagine if we said that everyone's correct. It'll be tough, huh?
There are problems that we don't know about.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And everyone on this planet sees themselves as victims. From the person who's destitute on the streets to the president of the country, sees themselves as victims. You understand? On WhatsApp something was trending, or Twitter. I won't say WhatsApp doesn't trend, but you know what I mean? Someone sent a picture of a president of one country being slapped, right? Okay, I'm sure he feels like a victim abused, right? All right, the person who slapped him, he was held down and punched on the face, I assume. I don't know what happened to him, but you just see this gang of guys jump on him, right? So currently, he's probably feeling that way. And we're not going to have a debate about it, but welcome to planet Earth. Everyone sees themselves as victims. All right? No matter who you feel you've been wronged by and you feel right, everyone goes into this world with a victim state. I've yet to meet someone who completely agrees. I've abused and shouted and screamed and fought and they completely fit in on this side. It takes a level of introspection. There are people who do agree they're on this side. All right? But most of us see ourselves as victims. So is that a good space or a bad space to be in? Bad. We don't want to be victims. You agree? Why is it not good to be a victim? We're powerless and we're recipients. And none of us want to be powerless. None of us want to be recipients because your whole mental, emotional, physical state is impacted by the powerless and being a recipient. And we walk around even with hunched shoulders, feeling sorry for ourselves. We can see someone who's coming across in a victim state. All right? A question to ask you, what is the last decision of power we assume we make that takes away our power? Given that we're speaking about other people.
Is it perhaps that we don't want to admit that we're victims?
We do acknowledge their predicament because we recognize if we're depressed, we've got a problem.
So we remove the toxic people from our lives.
You remove toxic people from your life, does that solve the problem? Some of us can sit on a desert island and be depressed.
Okay.
Right? There's something you're doing. You remove them. What you've said to me, you physically remove them.
Yes.
All right? Does that help you?
No.
Some of us watch TV and we get depressed. Angry, shout, scream, especially if you're watching something politically related. You agree? And they're not even in your presence. They don't even know you exist. So what do you do? There's something you and I do that facilitates victimhood.
We allow it.
How do you allow it? You keep? There's something you and I do in order to facilitate victimhood. What we do is we blame. We blame. In order to be a victim, you have to blame. What you're doing is saying, I'm no more responsible for myself. I thrust responsibility for myself onto the others around me. They are responsible for where I am in my life. And the moment you do that, you have pushed yourself into a disempowered position. You give recognition to the fact that they are in charge. And we are wired over time to take on that others are in charge. It's interesting, when they're young, it's interesting to watch them. Do you agree? Most kids have a lot of energy and spirit, right? And they're kind of all over the show. And you find sometimes you tell them, don't do that. Do they listen to you? No. Why? Because they just go on. Because they're checking out this world. They're figuring it out. Oh, let's see that hammer. Bang. Oh, sorry. Let's check it out again. Bang, bang. Let's check out that glass, right? You understand? They're testing their world, right? And what do you and I say? Don't do this. Don't do that, right? You agree? You do this. You do that. Well, most of the time we spend don't do that. So we're closing off their world. But then what's more exciting and curiosity driving? Is it what exists within your world or what exists outside your world? Outside, like kids sticking their heads out the window. Don't do that. Do it. Why? What's wrong with that? Oh, the wind. Beautiful, right? Oh, I can check the car's tires. Oh, I can see underneath the car. That's a bit dangerous, but you understand what I'm saying? They're testing. They're checking out this world. And we're pushing them into the small, narrow world. Why do we do that? To protect them, keep them safe, right? So what we're doing is we learn that we have to give responsibility to other people. So we blame. All right? So the question comes up, kind of give the answer away, what is the opposite of blame? In that context, if we don't want to be victims.
Acceptance.
Of what?
Or to take responsibility before the blame.
Take responsibility. And acceptance would come in as in, I accept responsibility for myself, I assume you agree? Is it only about taking responsibility for yourself? No. What is it? Everyone that's close to you. Sometimes the people close to you you take responsibility for, yes. And as we grow in this age where we live within nuclear family networks, we only take responsibility for our families, right? But you got to take responsibility for the whole world. Okay? Sometimes watching television and you're watching some president of some country and he says something or she says something. Most of them are men, so it's he says something. And it irks you, isn't it? And you're like, oh my God, and next day it's trending on Twitter and all those things. And that person doesn't even know you exist. You're not even from that person's country. Okay? And then you say, I'm shocked that they said that. How dare they say that? You know? Right? We get in this negative space. You have to take responsibility for everyone on this planet. But why are we struggling with that statement? Because you and I do something as a way we assume is equated to responsibility. What do we do in the name of responsibility? When I ask you, you are responsible, what does that mean we do? What do we all do? What we assume responsibility is I got to control the situation. I got to put in effort and make it right. What I'll tell you is you and I have to learn that you can only control 1% of life. As in maybe what you choose to eat, what you'll drink. Maybe you can control your son when he's 7 years old. When he's 17, probably the toughest. You probably got more chance of controlling him when he's 47, right? When he's 17, why? Because someone's come into his life. You got no control. When he's 47, you might have more control because she's left his life, right? Right? And then you're thinking, I don't want control, I don't want responsibility. But when he's 17, you listen to me, and he's probably like, oh yeah, sure, right? It's interesting, right? We assume responsibility is control. Responsibility, you can control 1% of life. Can you control tomorrow?
No.
Can you control what's going to happen in the next moment? You don't even know what's for lunch today, unless they publish it, right? I don't know. You have no control over 99% of life. It was like this morning getting up. Geez, it's cold. Okay, yes, you can check your watch and try and figure it out. And you kind of test the weather in this country, and then we decide what to wear, right? Because we have great weather generally, so you kind of like, oh, okay, I got to wear a thicker jacket or something to that extent, right? Right? You can control what you wear, but you can't control the weather. 99% of life you can't control. And so responsibility actually equates to control plus awareness. Awareness means, yes, people will act as they wish, but you and I need to develop the awareness of the full spectrum of human behavior. Accepting people for what they are rather than what you'd like them to be. In more than that even, accepting people for what they are rather than what they make themselves out to be. Because some of us just don't even know who we are. And the last one is accepting people for what they are rather than the whole world may make them out to be. Because sometimes the world's caught up in a delusion as to how people are. So you need to equate responsibility with control plus awareness. And usually what we do with awareness is we assume because we don't know it is fine. So when bad things happen, we're ignorant, naive, and sometimes foolish. But sometimes, if we were just aware, observing, we'd be able to prepare for this full spectrum of human behavior. And as much as you can't do anything about it, you do not react because of how they behaved. You still respond. And you still maintain your authenticity and align yourself with where you're going to. You do not allow yourself to swing like this pendulum. Oh, this happened. And some of us, it takes a very minor issue to swing us. And some of us, it takes a huge issue to swing us, which is brilliant because then we're demonstrating resilience and perseverance in spite of what has life thrown at us. Okay? And something interesting, because I've got to relate it to relationships. Perchance some of us are in a space like this, in terms of how we are, in terms of people. What kind of people come into our lives then? If you are in a state of being a victim, what kind of people do we facilitate? People who will victimize us. Does that resonate? Okay, because if you see yourself as a victim, we facilitate victimization. This is how, all those people we invited into a room, all right, and they said they're on this side. By the way, where do they truly exist? Are they out there? Where are they? If we brought them into rooms, some of the people we probably had to bring in by force, right? I'm not saying we bring them in, but you understand? Because they say, I don't even know you. But we put them there, right? Okay? Where are they really? Where do they exist? In your minds, yes. All right? Because some of us can think of someone and you go there immediately, even more so there. All right? And what you've done, you've put them there. They don't exist out there, they exist in your minds. You see yourself, in order to see yourself there, you have to see the world there, but where does the world exist? The world exists in your minds. Does that resonate? Okay, because someone else, like today, it's a cold day. You'll all agree? You agree? Well, okay. You're wondering why I'm asking. Because sometimes I picture freezing, right? And someone sitting there with shorts and saying, Doctor, gosh, it's hot. Can we put the aircon on cold? Because that's their perception, you know? And I'm like, wow, you know, like amazingly, all of us perceive the world differently. You understand? And the perception exists in your mind. You form the world in your mind. Does that make sense? So, for example, some of us speak a language Zulu. Some of us. Anyone? Okay. Gosh, really changing. 10 years ago, lots of people put up their hands. Right? So, right? It's something interesting I learned because a guy grew up in the Midlands of Natal. And he described cows, and he's telling me, I said, well, that's a black and white cow, and he gave me a name for that cow. I said, that's a brown and black cow, and he gave me a name for that cow. He had different names for different cows based on their colors. That's the richness of the language of Zulu, that they have different names for different color cow. I'm an English-speaking person. I just know there's black and white cow, brown, black cow. You know, you understand what I'm saying? It doesn't make any difference to me, but the wealth of the world, the mind that he lives in is so much more beautiful in terms of what he was seeing than what I was perceiving. They all look like cows to me. You know, the same standard cow. You understand? What I'm saying is that the world exists in your minds. The people exist in your minds. And what you've done, let's draw it, is that you and I, in order for you to sit here, you have to have someone sitting there on a seesaw. And you've balanced the world out, but there's a huge imbalance. Does that resonate? Because where does this person exist? In your head, in your mind. And you've balanced yourself out in order to kind of reach some balance, because the mind kind of wants to be comfortable, safe, and secure, right? And in order to be here, it has to facilitate someone or some people there. In order for you to be on this end of the seesaw, you have to put someone there. In order for you to see yourself as being a victim, you have to create the world of victimization. You understand? Now, perchance you're in a relationship. If you're here, you have to facilitate someone there. Let me ask you a general question. Perchance someone is in an abusive relationship and they get beaten up regularly, all right? And the relationship, hopefully, fortunately, ends. What is generally the nature of the next relationship? Excuse me? Abuse again. Why?
Because it's all in the mind, as you said.
All in the mind. We facilitate a world that is this. Let me give you a practical example. In this country, when you drive on the freeway, all right, and you got your windows wide open, and you pull up to the off-ramp at the robots, as we call it, and someone's walking towards your car, what do you do to your car windows? Why did you do that? What drove that? Fear. In the mind, the instinct, the emotion of fear drove that. We could put the word fear here. Why? Because you fear anger and aggression. So you put the person there, and maybe they were coming to sell you a hat. But you still, interestingly, carry that instinct of fear. It's so instinctive. You are wired to recognize that. And even though you may, in another country where maybe it's safe, you may instinctively see someone walk into your car window. You may recognize, wait, this is a bit strange. No one does that in this country. But you still might close your window, but you'll be on edge and irritable because you're not sure whether to go into fight, flight, fright mode. You understand? Because we instinctively fear is fight, flight, fright. Right? Sometimes they pull up and you think they've got nothing to sell. You'll drive your car forward, flight. Right? And sometimes some of us will say, who's in charge? Yeah, I'll show you and I'll fight. I'm not saying we do one or the other. It's fascinating. In order to be here, you have to have someone or some people there. Right? And this is the nature of relationships. Because people ask me, why do I attract such scum in my life? If you're here, you facilitate this. If you're naive, you might facilitate someone who's a bit, what's the word, overt or cynical or sarcastic. You agree? All right? If you've got a psychopath in your life, you might argue that you've got to be a bit overwhelmed or even dependent. Does that resonate? We facilitate various types of relationships into our lives based on the type of person you and I are. If someone is amazingly loving and you and I lack love, does that mean that relationship will work? Oh, wow, I'm so lacking in love. Here's someone who really loves me. Does that mean it's a good it's a balance? That not necessarily, as you're saying. Why? If you can't see love and that person's giving love, you won't see the full spectrum of love that they're offering. And then we wonder why we end up in relationships lacking in love. Because we don't love ourselves enough. You understand? So it's fascinating. What we see is what we get. What we perceive is what we receive. What we receive is what we perceive. So we reinforce our picture of the world. Why do we do that? Because it keeps us safe. You're going to ask something? What makes you the type of person you are? As you said, as we discussed, it's maybe you're growing up. What you were exposed to and how you were taught, wired, fired your wiring to see the world. Some would argue, because it's not just all nurturing, it's also the nature, our genetic wiring. Because if you have kids, you'll recognize one kid has a different personality to the other. I'm wondering where this comes from. And you'll see it as, I look at it as a genetic wiring you're carrying that manifests and expresses, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Because sometimes you'll see, geez, this kid reminds me of, well, if it's a bad quality, you'll say, my husband's mother. Right? Everyone gives a huge laugh when I say that, right? If it's a good quality, that obviously comes from me, right? And it's fascinating to see certain traits, right? And usually, yes, if you're the father and you see this, the wife says, this guy's acting weird, and you just keep quiet because you did the same weird thing when you were young. You understand what I'm saying? So it's interesting because we physically and mentally manifest certain ways, right? I mean, I have a son, yes, I'm of Indian descent, and he eats cake like he's eating curry, you know, with both hands. And like, it's quite fascinating to watch because I don't do that, but maybe I'll blame it on some great grandfather, maybe on the wife's side, you know, I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Well, why does he eat? Whereas his sister is like from young already with a fork and knife, you know, twirling the pasta. I'm like, wow, you know, where did this come from? You understand? So it's fascinating physically, mentally, and emotionally what we may be manifesting. And why I like exploring this genetics is sometimes you may feel at a particular time in life, you may be going all right in life and suddenly you feel depressed and you don't know why because nothing's changed. At different times in your life, different genetics seems to manifest and some seem to regress. As much as you were 16 and want to explore the world, kind of when you suddenly 26, 36, and I'd rather just sit at home and do nothing. You understand? Different times, different things manifest and express. You understand? And that way facilitates different types of people in your lives as well. Yes? Wow. Can you control? So we're looking at genetics and the nature and the nurture. All right? So studies have been done that facilitate that you can change who you are. It may be a deliberate process. It is a conscious process, but you can change much of who you are. All right? At a mental and emotional level, it means huge amounts of self-control. But you can change who you are. Okay? For example, I've been doing these talks for a while. Okay? And because I got into the habit of doing them in a particular way, it became habitual. Now, with these things being now put onto some social media platforms, I have to change some of the things I do, right? And so it becomes a deliberate process to change the habit, to rewire your brain, okay? To refire your brain in a different direction, to see the world differently, rather to see the world in the way we used to see All right, so we rebuild neurons in our brain. Previously, if we were giving this talk 20, 30 odd years ago, they saw the brain, the mind as being a static organ. You were stuck with it, this is it. But now we recognize that the brain is a dynamic entity that you can fundamentally change. In fact, there's a Professor Carol Dweck who wrote a book called The Dynamic Mindset, where she describes young children, because those ones are more open to change than you and I are, because we seem to stick with our old wiring. And they looked at young children in different cities in the United States. And they found some young children who had grown up in adverse economic circumstances, inner cities and other areas in the States, where you wouldn't expect much from them academically, because generally that was the trend. But they found pockets of children who did better than the average, in spite of their circumstances. And they went and investigated. And as much as maybe they ate different foods or whatever circumstances, they found one key factor was the teacher that was exposing the children and influencing them in a more positive way. And along the lines of, and I'm summarizing it, of showing them love, giving them support, yet challenging them to achieve a more powerful self. So you have these young kids playing the violin, quoting Shakespeare, in spite of the circumstances. So they refused to be because of person, people, situation, and circumstances. They were despite those circumstances. And it took another person who they responded to because of the love, the compassion, and kindness to shift them. You can achieve far more if you know people have you, support you, rather than people criticizing you and judging you. When people criticize and judge you, they stand in front of you and block you. When they support you and have your back, as I will put it, you can go forward. You understand? With our kids, we tend to sometimes criticize and judge. The idea is to support them so they can move forward. We all want that in life. We want people to support us and take us forward. So what we do, we demonstrate power. So we go here, right? The anger, the aggression. So we push the child here. So what you're teaching your child, what I or most of us do, is we're teaching them how to react to the world rather than how to respond. And as you said, sometimes it takes a lot of effort, and that's what we all don't like doing, because effort means time and energy. All right? And we want a quick solution rather than shifting how we are as people. You understand? So yes, then we're teaching and we're wiring the child to react to anger. And what the kid will learn as well is that they need to employ anger to get people to do what they want. So be wary what we teach our children, because as much as we think we have got the quick result, yes. For example, with the COVID virus, right? Right now there's fortunately a vaccine. Okay? And most people, if they have the availability, are taking the vaccine. Why? Because it's a quick fix. But maybe at a fundamental level, one has to go into the source of the cause of the COVID was apparently eating certain types of animals, and maybe if we didn't, it would have been better. But all of us, including myself, was in the queue to receive our vaccines, right? Because the medication is a quick fix. And that's also with the fact that many people are not taking it because they're worried about the side effects. Sometimes when there's a quick fix, you've got to question there's something as well that you're giving up in the process. So yes, we may get the result we want, but be wary that it has its consequences. And when you say that example, I want to share with you, there's an American author, philosopher called Thoreau. And he describes back in the day, I think it was he was in the last century, even 1800s, they had this baby calf, bull, right? And they were trying to push it, he and his son, into the barn. So there's he pulling it by the rope that was tied around his nose or his head, and his son was pushing from behind. And that's complete physical, right? You might argue, a lot of strength, a lot of energy. And it pushed, but this was a strong baby bull, right? It just didn't want to move. It held its ground and refused. And they just couldn't get it into the barn. Complete, physical energy, right? So he and his son then sit down tired. And his daughter comes along, all right? And holds out her finger, and the baby bull starts licking it, and she walks into the barn with the calf. Right? And he and his son are sitting there looking at this. All right? What do we men do? Macho, yeah, I'll show you who's in charge, and push, and I'll push again. And there's this expression of love. You understand? All right? I mean, I'm guilty. You know, the kid, get ready for school. And the wife's, come now, we're getting to school, right? Sometimes I succeed, as in, I will carry you and put you in the car. She kind of wins with love most of the time. And they tend to listen to her more because of that. Love always wins the day. It's not about what people do for you that matters, it's how they make you feel. You and I will react and respond to how people make us feel sometimes, more so, definitely, than what they do for us. All right? So let's, in the time we have left, you're on this side and there's the other person on the other side, okay? And you want to try and reach that balance, that calm, that control. What do you have to do? If that's you and there's that person, what do you got to do in terms of reaching that balance, that control, that calm? And this is an abusive relationship. What do you do? What do you need to do? How can you reach balance on that seesaw? Now remember in the beginning I said something I'll refer back to. It's your 16-year-old daughter with that guy who's 18 and he abuses her and stuff. Are you going to tell her to communicate to him? No. What are you going to tell her? Why did you change your answer? Because when it comes to everyone else, we all got the solutions. But with us, you know, communicate, try, come to Crescent, work out on our clinic, you know, survival skills. But yes, 99% you will try and communicate and try and reach the balance. 1%, if the relationship's toxic, get the hell out of there. Isn't it? If it's dangerous to your health, your physical being, get out. Yes, but 99% of relationships find the balance. We're in the middle. All right, that means you do not take one end or the other. You do not become the reaction to the action. Your pendulum's at rest. Okay? You understand? So this is where, as much as me less than others, me greater than others, this is where it's me equal to others. All right? Where that's passive and aggressive, what's this? Assertive. What does it mean to be assertive? It means total, complete, absolute respect for who? For myself and others. And besides the word respect, you can use other words: love, dignity, integrity, humility, compassion, kindness, caring, graciousness, gratitude towards yourself and others. What it means is learning to love yourself again, feeling okay with yourself, recognizing that you're okay in order for the world to be okay, recognizing that you're fine to be fine, recognizing that you're all right as you are, all right? And that leads you to feeling calm and in control, balanced and free. Because when you're in the center, that facilitates relationships of the center where the only relationships you have is people that demonstrate dignity, integrity, humility, where you're in the middle and they're in the middle, because that facilitates the world you want to see. If you treat yourself with respect, compassion, kindness, you treat everyone else with respect, compassion, and kindness. You understand? Where you see yourself as love, you see others as love. You've got to change that world within you by being compassionate to yourselves. Is it as easy as that to get to the middle? No, why not? Because we're all carrying our baggage, right? We're all carrying our world within us. How do we change that world? It's challenging, okay? You and I are here for 3 weeks and we're trying to change our world. And we all know of Mandela, right? Imagine how he must have felt in his cell 3-4 years into his sentence. You agree? He would have felt hopeless, sad, weak, maybe at the next moment angry, shouting, screaming, fighting, all right? Good space or bad space? Bad. So he writes in his book, Long Walk to Freedom, different parts. He writes, I could have gotten very angry at what suffering my people were going through, but I chose not to get angry and thereby set myself free. I kept my head facing towards the sun and my feet walking forward. I decided I could not and would not lose my dignity. What he demonstrates is he reflected and contemplated and got to a deep space where he describes that if he held on to the anger when he left prison, he would still be a prisoner of those who put him in. He refused to be a prisoner with a pendulum on one end or the other because of people. What he demonstrates is someone who was in spite of people. And what sometimes he gets criticized for in this country sometimes from time to time is that he demonstrates love. We expect him to be angry. Why? Because in our world we'd be angry. And some of us don't want to let go of our anger, right? As much as it causes our blood pressure to rise, heart rates to go up, and get heart attacks in the process, he demonstrated love, compassion, kindness in spite of the situation and circumstance. I'm not saying now go and end up in jail for 27 years, although it feels that way, that in order to break free, but to break free by going within our minds. Because nowadays, it's not about a physical slavery. You and I are caught up in a mental slavery, and the kind of mental we are slaves of is we are depressed. We are feeling hopeless, we're feeling anxious, we're feeling stressed. Why? Because we can't control the world anymore. It's overwhelming us, it's overburdening us. As much as we sit at home hiding from the COVID virus, the world seeps in through the windows, just comes in through all these social media platforms and just completely overwhelms us. And as much as what's happened is that world exists within our minds where we kind of then build on that world and it just gets us into a negative space. And we've got to not be slaves of the mind, we have to master the mind. Use the mind as a tool rather than you and I being tools of the mind. All right? You've got to control that mind, as they say, like a lion grabs a goat by its neck. Never let it go. Control the mind rather than you and I being controlled by the mind. Okay, so even there, I'll give you a 5-step process how we can get to the middle. One is to introspect, to look within, to go deep, to reflect, to contemplate, introspection. Why don't we like doing that? Tough, huh? Yes. Why we don't like doing that is because it's easy to see the bad out there, but to see the bad within us, it's hard. Why? Because we have to face up to the dirt within. Huh? Because when you introspect, you know, if water has sediment at the bottom, what you're doing by introspecting is we're mixing the water with a spoon and that sediment rises. And now you see the dirt. But when you focus on the outside, you don't see the dirt within us. Then we can talk about the dirt on the outside. So introspection means going within, contemplating, reflecting. And it's something some people do for hours a day. Reflecting, contemplating, journalizing, going deep to see that. And very important, when you introspect, takes us to step number 2, is to become aware, accept and acknowledge the brutal truth, as we might call it, because we hate seeing it as great, we recognize it as brutal. But very important, substitute that word, not with the brutal, with the compassionate truth. So you aware, accept and acknowledge the compassionate truth. See it for what it is, with compassion rather than seeing it for what it is with brutality. Why do we struggle? Because if we see something negative in the world, we react with brutality. We are very quick to criticize, judge, shout, scream, fight. You agree? Because we feel we're in the right. But when we see the wrong within us, we assume we have to react with brutality, is to be compassionate. And how does that help? Is that when you see someone performing wrong in the world, you then, if you start seeing them more compassionately, it makes you more gentle with the world. Why is that important? Because then you'll be more gentle with yourselves. Depression is where you got to a point where you were so brutal to yourself, you even destroyed yourself in the process. Usually we're depressed because of people on the outside, because they've done wrong to us. But you need to be gentle with yourself, because then no one can be wrong to you. You see them for what they are. You do not necessarily allow yourself to judge the action, you let them be. And that creates and helps with, as we discussed, the awareness. That takes us to number 3, control and responsibility for your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. So if you take the mind, you need to control your thoughts. Take responsibility for what you feel. Take responsibility and control for your actions. There's a nice Christian saying, biblical saying, quick to listen, slow to talk and anger. So we need to learn to respond to the world rather than reacting to the world. Where something happens and you see it here and we immediately go there. But rather than doing that, if something happens at an aggressive space, you maintain your calm, your composure. You remain, I like to use the word equipoise. Equipoise in spite of insult and honor. That means you're not, what's the word, splayed or frayed by, be it victory or defeat, by praise or insult, by being told you're wrong or right. All things you just flow through because it's one person's opinion at one moment in time that you're the best, and you know that very same person the next moment in time will say you're the worst. So you don't allow those external judgments to make you. You are driven by internal purpose, regardless of those around you. And that takes us to number 4, which is detach, forgive, let go, and it's absolute forget. Detach, forgive, let go, and forget. People tell me this one's the hardest. Why? Because to forgive is tough. Why? Because then you have to let go of this person that exists in your mind. And then what you got to recognize, the world as you created it for the last 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years was a complete illusion. It existed in your mind. And that means how you were living. You know, we walk and we go around something because it's a pain or it's a issue. You had no reason to go around it. It was never there. It existed in your mind. You were completely in control. You could have done whatever you wanted to. But you and I live in reaction to everyone and anyone out there. So we always get to a point where we're walking this way and that eventually, if you ended up here, there was a wall in front of you. Where is that wall? Really? In your mind. You can go straight through. The whole thing that holds you back is your mind, because you've made yourself a slave of the mind. You cannot break through because the only thing holding you back is you. And we end up depressed in your mind. Nowadays, you don't need to tie a person up in a ball and chain. You just brainwash their minds and they'll hold themselves up with a ball and chain. You agree? And that's what we've done. We're holding ourselves back in the small box, and now something within you is saying, get out of the space. I don't like the space I'm in. Break free. And that causes the tension within us, because at some point you want to break free, but the mind's saying, no, 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 no. Preservation, comfort, security, safety. But you're not in a good space anyway, so you might as well just break free. But you and I are human beings. We put this mind on a pedestal. It knows best. Got me through grade 1, grade 3, matric. Got me my job. Now you're telling me to leave it behind. No ways. Sometimes if you were clueless and you didn't use your mind, you would just break through. There was nothing holding you back. You understand? So detach, forgive, let go, forget. And number 5 is something I haven't drawn. Is where your pendulum is here, and you have an equal and opposite force on the opposite end. Move forth towards your purpose, your truth, your meaning in life. Find your legacy, your cause, whatever you want to do to make a difference. Then you've broken free of these barriers. You're not allowing yourself to be more so a reaction to person and people. You are driven by a cause, something far more. Yes, people will even try and push you one way or the other, but you do not allow them to distract you or detract you from your path. You're on your own journey, but it has to be authentic, something that's in keeping with the universe, selfless. Because if it is for some ulterior motive, some ego-driven need, then all you're doing is pushing yourself one end or the other, because then you're driven by the mind. But if you're driven from a perspective of selflessness, it is beyond the mind. If it's driven by something from the universe, it's beyond the mind. All right. So in that way, you're refusing then to be a victim of person, people, situations, circumstances. You then create and facilitate your own destiny, a place you want to go to. Because all of us want to experience a level of freedom. And the freedom in this day and age is freedom from the mind. Fortunately, no one at some level draws on us physical barriers, but you want freedom from the mind. Because the mind is holding you back. That's where our depression and anxiety stems from. Okay. Thanks.